The Fat Recording of Luke Gulley, Part 2. Very little is known about Luke Gulley. But, what is known, is that he was born in the month of May, in 1833, in the state of Mississippi, and that he died in Bluff City, Arkansas in 1903. We also know that he fathered 4 children. 2 boys, and 2 girls. The girls were named Frances and Sophia. The name of the 2 boys are Anthony, who has 2 spellings of his name. His 1870 census has the spelling as Anthony, and his 1880 census has the spelling Anthony. Anthony was born in May of 1860, and died on September 12, 1926. Anthony had a younger brother who died 6 years before he did. His name is Spencer. Spencer was born in 1864, and died in the year 1920. Anthony was 4 or 5 years old when his father Luke joined the 79th Regiment of the United States Colored Troops, of Company A, where he fought for freedom, and to save the Union, in order to secure that freedom for his children, and future descendants. The 79th United States Colored Infantry was an all-black infantry regiment that fought for the Union Army during the Civil War. In August of 1862, recruiting for a colored regiment commenced in Kansas, and over 600 men were soon mustered in. The regiment, however, was not mustered into the United States service until January 13, 1863. It was then designated the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry Regiment, but its name was changed, in December of 1864, to the 79th United States Colored Infantry. Because we have a military service record for Luke Gulley, stating that Luke was a part of the 79th United States Colored Infantry in 1864. It would be logical to conclude that Luke Gulley enlisted in the Army or around December of 1864, when the 1st Kansas Regiment was changed to the 79th Regiment. It was the 79th Regiment that Luke enlisted into. The 79th Regiment had many losses during the Civil War, but they also saw a lot of action. In late 1863, during the American Civil War, Union leadership was interested in sending an expedition to attack the Confederate state of Texas. The Confederate forces in the region were part of the Trans-Mississippi Department. The Confederate units that remained in Arkansas were under the command of Major General Sterling Price. The Union's combined forces were beginning to have supply issues, especially the lack of food. By April 15, Union forces had occupied Camden. Lack of supplies continued to be an issue for the Union forces, and Steele dispatched a force of approximately 1,100 men under the command of Colonel James M. Williams on April 17, to search for food. The Union Army consisted of the 1st Kansas Infantry United States Colored Troops, the 18th Iowa Infantry, 4 cannons, and elements of several cavalry regiments. The Confederates learned of a supply train, and sent a force composed of Marmaduke's cavalry as well as a brigade commanded by Brigadier General William L. Cabell. This force was later augmented by 8 Confederate divisions, giving the Confederates a total strength of about 3,500 available men, to go up against the 600 men of the 79th Regiment of Colored Troops, and 500 Union Army soldiers. On April 18, the Confederate divisions, which were composed of a brigade of Texan Confederate soldiers under Colonel Charles de Morse and Walker's Native Americans, hit the flank of the Union troops. However, the Confederates' initial assault was repulsed by the 1st Kansas United States Colored Troops. The next Confederate charge was more coordinated, with 2 Confederate generals attacking the Union force at the same time. After a fight of about an hour, the Confederate troops were again forced to retreat, but the Union soldiers began to run low on ammunition. A 3rd Confederate charge broke the flank of the Union position, and the 1st Kansas United States Colored Troops abandoned its position. The 18th Iowa, a white regiment, attempted to form a second line, but was quickly driven off by the Confederate assault. The colored troops of the 1st Kansas were showed no mercy. Many of the members of the Kansas Regiment who fell into Confederate hands were killed and mutilated, and some observers reported that Walker's Choctaws took scalps from dead Union soldiers. The Union Regular Army lost 301 men. The 1st Kansas United States Colored Troops lost 182 men, out of 438 men, who had participated in the battle. 117 of the 182 losses in the Kansas Regiment were killed, which was an unusually high killed-to-wounded ratio. Luke Gulley was one of 65 men of the 79th U.S.C.T. that survived that battle. The site of the battlefield is preserved within Poison Springs Battleground State Park, which is part of the Camden Expedition Site's National Historic Landmark. The state park is located 12 miles from Camden, Arkansas, and includes 84 acres of the battlefield. The Camden Expedition Site's National Historic Landmark, which includes the Poison Spring Battleground as well as other sites related to Steele's campaign, was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1994. Luke Gulley is in the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C. For he was a part of the 79th Regiment of the United States Colored Infantry that was once the 1st Regiment, Kansas Colored Infantry, Company A. His plaque number is C-86. There are many African Americans that were never taught the history of the United States colored troops, leaving them to believe that Northern whites put their lives on the line to save those of African descent from the institution of slavery. In light of this history, African Americans all over the United States can take pride in knowing that it was their ancestors who fought for their freedom, and it was their ancestors who fought to save the Union, in order to secure that freedom. There has never been, and never will be, any kind of letter or document from any Northern white person that proclaims that Northern whites put their lives on the line to save the enslaved people in the Southern states. The descendants of Luke Gulley should be proud to know that their ancestors fought for them to live as freed men and women in the United States of America, and that they secured that freedom by helping to defeat the Confederate Southern states, at a time when the fall of the Union was imminent. These former slaves were willing to die for a chance to have their children born and live a life of freedom. With that, I thank you, Luke Gulley, for your sacrifice and your fortitude. For without men like you, at a time most needed, what would have become of these United States of America, and the institutions of slavery that were allowed to be, until the threat of destruction was upon her? If you enjoyed this fat recording of Luke Gulley, a soldier in the United States Colored Troops, like and share to help the channel, and subscribe to the Bang YouTube channel, and open notifications, so that you can be notified of new content when it is uploaded. The next fat recording in this family group will be Spencer Gulley. Thanks again for listening. Now, this fat recording will end in 3, 2, 1.